I'm Kate O'Connor, and I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of all the Board of Directors, who many of them are here today, everybody's waving, I want to welcome you to our annual legislative preview with Vermont Chamber President Betsy Bishop. We love it that Betsy comes every year, fills us in on what's going on. Before I pass the microphone over to Betsy, I just want to give you a little updates on a couple of things we're doing. But first, I want to, and I hope everybody will give a round of applause to TD Bank, who has made this breakfast possible. Carl Lind is here, so we want to thank Carl. And everybody's got to take your pen home, because everybody needs a pen. So Carl, take your TD, you can think of Carl all day with your pen. I also just want on your table, we have a little sheet that says news from the Brattleboro Area Chamber of Commerce. And we have some upcoming events that I want to make sure everybody's aware of. This Friday through Sunday, November 30th through December 2nd, is our 31st annual Holly Nights shopping and dining promotion. And there's cards on the table for everyone, and there's also a pile of them on your way out. You get special event savings and deals at 28 area businesses. It's a great chance to not only get good deals, but to support our local restaurateurs and retailers. So please take this with you. You can also enter into a raffle, which is very exciting. Don't want to miss that. Our next event next week, we have two events coming up. Thursday, December 6th, is our annual holiday mixer. That's sponsored by Brattleboro Savings and Loan, and that's up at the Brattleboro Music Center. I don't know if people know where that is. That's across from Living Memorial Park, and that's from 5:30 to 7. If you haven't been able to go to the Music Center, it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for you to look around. And they've done a fabulous job up there. But it's also a fun event, and it's free. So if you want to bring your friends and families and coworkers, we'd love to see everybody there. On Saturday, December 8th, is the Jingle Bell Jog. This is our 5th annual 5K race. We do it snow or shine, as we say. And if you want, it's family friendly, but if you're an avid racer, it's professionally timed, so you can get your time at the end. And it's a fun event. People dress up. You don't have to, but you can dress up in your best Santa costume and win a prize. So we'd love to have you come to that. And if you need more info, you can look at our website or call the office. And thinking way, way far ahead, we have our annual meeting date, which is next year, January 24th, which is a Thursday. So mark that on your calendar, but obviously we're going to let you all know again when that one is. And one little other point on your sheet is health insurance. The Chamber, thanks a lot to Betsy's hard work and her staff's hard work, the Chambers of Commerce in Vermont are now able to offer health insurance again. It was a benefit that we were able to offer several years ago, and then it went away. So if you are interested in signing up for health insurance, give us a call. As always, we still offer vision and dental as well. So if you're interested in that, it's a really great competitive health plan. One more thing before I bring the person we're all here to see to the podium is because this is a legislative preview, I want to acknowledge the legislators in the room. And I see two, and if there's other ones, I want you to yell out to me. We have Mike Morwicki. You can wave or stand. And we have Emily Long. And I don't think there are any other legislators, but if there are, wave. And we'll have the legislators usually come, and I'll put Mike and Emily on the spot, and they come in March to give us an update on what's happening, sort of halfway through the legislative session. So without further ado, I won't go on and on and on. I'm going to bring Betsy Bishop, President of the Vermont State Chamber, up. Thanks, Betsy.
Well, hello there. I have Kate. Can I borrow you? Don't quite leave yet, since I have to do this on mine. So just hang on one second here. I have all sorts of things I want to talk to you about today, and certainly legislation is one of them. But I really need to start with saying thank you to Brattleboro. You folks are the most welcoming community. We do this, we call these road shows. We're on the road for the next 2 months all over the state. And you folks always have an amazing turnout, so thank you, Kate. Thank you, Greg. Greg's probably still out, he's somewhere, okay. And very welcoming, and it's funny, the announcement that went out, the invitation that went out from the Brattleboro Chamber said, you know, Betsy Bishop is coming to town, and had 3 exclamation points after my name. And 2 people who reside not in Windham County at all sent them to me and said, wow, they're really looking forward to having you in Brattleboro. And I'm like, yes. So we're going to play a little game to start with, and this is where I need Kate. I'm really, the other reason I'm really thrilled to be in Brattleboro is my husband informed me by text this morning that this begins day 3 for me without electricity at home. Anybody else here? A couple, so great. So I enjoyed my stay at the Latches last night, and good Vermont Chamber member, and appreciate that. So I came down last night and I had a dinner with a group, and I'm going to show you the swag that I got from the group, and you're going to tell me who I had dinner with last night, okay? That's the fun game. Before I do that, I'm also going to introduce Charles Martin. Charles, if you would just stand up. Charles is our Director of Government Affairs. He's 2 months into the job. He's joining us on these road shows. He comes to us from Senator Leahy's office in both DC and then in Montpelier. Norwich University grad, Vermont native, National Guard member. So welcome, Charles, to the team. So my swag is, let's face it, we're chambers of commerce, so it's a little business-like swag. So I appreciate the pen. I'm a big fan of TV swag, so thank you. I received Southern Vermont Has It All. Yes? These are clues, you don't have to shout out quite yet. I received a very lovely annual report telling me about everything in economic development. And finally, this.
I was encouraged to wear this, but it didn't quite fit the outfit, but. Who did I have dinner with last night? Anyone?
Yeah, go ahead. Come on, shout out.
The lovely folks at the Brattleboro Development Council.
Correct. There you go. So thank you. I'd like to do a shout out to Drew Richards as well, who hosted last night. Drew is a member of my board of directors. The Richards Group has been a member of ours for a long time. So thank you very much to the team, and really sort of appreciate that. So we're going to get started on why you really came, and one of the things that I want to talk about today is, I sort of talk about this as it's a little bit politics, it's a lot policy, and it's about our priorities. So as many of you know, when I come here, I represent Vermont businesses. I represent the businesses that are members of ours. Thank you for those of you who are members. Thank you for those of you who are members of the Brattleboro Chamber of Commerce. It's these chambers in your communities that help your downtowns thrive, help your communities thrive, and certainly as we look at some of our demographic challenges in the state, we need those chambers to thrive. So thank you for your participation and your support. On your tables, you've got a few different things here. You've got a list of our lobbying team. These are folks that you can call on any issue you need. You can email us if that's your preference. Send us an email and say, I heard X, Y, or Z and I'm a little worried about that, or I really love this particular thing, can you help me out? Who would I talk to about this issue? These are the people who are experts in their field on this, and so this is an area that I would ask you to take this home, keep this on your desk. This is your team, so certainly feel free to utilize that. And our key priorities are on the back, but we're going to get into a couple of details. So the other thing I love about Brattleboro is I have like an entire desk here, right up here. It's huge, and I'm only 5'2", so I always feel like I can't see beyond that. So hopefully I won't drift too far. So a couple of things about the legislature this year. What we heard last year at the end of the session was that it was hugely contentious, that there were real big struggles between the governor and his administration and the legislative leadership. Is that sort of some head nods? Is that sort of the image that you had down here, that there were some real tussles during the session? And there were. But I would like to put out another idea for you folks, and that is that, yes, there were some high-profile fights, but overall, the Democratic majority in both the House and the Senate last year, and the Republican administration got along and did some really good things for Vermont. And as proof of that, on your tables is something that we call our success list, our wins. I don't expect anybody to take this home and study it, but we do have copies if you want to. But if you look at this wins list, and I'm not going to go through them because I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about what's coming up, there's a lot of wins. And we put our setbacks on here as well, and those were the two at the very bottom. So for us, in the business community, representing the Vermont Chamber of Commerce across the entire state, with our 4-person lobbying team, we felt like we had a pretty good session. So while some of the high-profile issues really focused on the fights, there's a lot of other good work that's going on in the session. So that's partly my message here today is, as we looked at the elections, there's a lot of people talking about, ooh, the supermajority, right? What are we going to do? From my perspective, as somebody who has worked in the State House for longer than I'd like to admit, in a variety of different roles, both in the administration and out, I see an opportunity to work together here. And yes, there are going to be some high-profile fights, and maybe I'll be in the middle of some of those, but hopefully we'll be able to do some good work together as well. And so that's where we're going to try to focus some of our attention today, is on what can get done. We can talk certainly about what we think some of the struggle points will be as well. But you know, the tone has been set after the election by both the Democratic leadership in the House and in the Senate, as well as the governor, saying, they're all saying the right things. It's like they got the same talking points, right? They all said, we have to work together more, even more now. But the numbers, while the numbers have gotten bigger so that there is a supermajority, they haven't changed all that dramatically. The legislature was led by a large majority where the Democrats held that majority in both the House and the Senate. They controlled every committee. They controlled the outcome. That's not new. That's going to continue to happen. The difference is the numbers, particularly in the House of Representatives, have given the House leadership a supermajority, which means they could possibly override a governor's veto on something. Considering the governor vetoed 13 bills last year, that's important. But there were hundreds that passed, so without that veto. So this is my point, is trying to think through sort of all of those things. So at the top of the list is always one issue that governs every other issue. Anybody know what that is in your businesses? What's the one issue that? Budget. Okay, your budget. It governs everything. We have a $5.5 billion budget in the state of Vermont. So when we start to talk about money here, keep that big number in mind and how much we're talking about in that huge, huge budget. So when we're talking about budget, a lot of times we're talking about taxes, fees, and expenditures. So both sides of that budget. Income in, income and expenses out. Very much like your own budget. And that's where so many of the fights are, is how much are we going to spend? So with $5.5 billion, the governor starts the conversation usually with, we're going to keep it at about that amount, and any kind of natural growth that's in there. So there's some sort of increase there, but no new revenue sources. The legislature doesn't always start there. And there are opportunities for increase taxes or fees along the way. And so those are where the fights tend to be, is where's the money coming from and where's it going? Just like in our businesses, it happens. There's a struggle around that. So what's interesting is the first 2 years of Governor Scott's administration, he ran 2 years ago on no new revenue sources, no new taxes, no new fees. He was very consistent about that. He put that hammer down in the first year and in the second year of his administration, and that's where a lot of the vetoes occurred, was around that. This year, if any of you are reading very carefully, you're starting to see a little bit of softening there. He has said to his administration, his cabinet members, as they're building the budget for this year, same thing, level funded budgets. However, if you think that there's something that's desperately needed, a new fee to pay for new enforcement or something like that, I will listen. So it doesn't sound very promising to most people. You might just scan right through that when he says that in the news. To me, that's like, oh, that's news, okay? Because he's opened the door a little bit for consideration. And I'm sure that that has not escaped the attention of the Democratic leadership as well. So the question is how much, how high, how often, and for what? So those are some of the issues that will come through. So we're anticipating that the governor will put forth a fairly level-funded budget with some natural revenue growth. I imagine that he will put forth an economic development plan, which he did last year, which was probably the majority of that plan was rejected. Some of it was put forward, but he brought forward quite a robust economic growth plan to address workforce issues, to address economic development, to address training, to address marketing. That was not passed in totality. Some pieces of that were passed. So I imagine that there will be another run at that. And that's of most interest to me. As a leader in the Vermont business community, I care about economic growth. I care about sustainable communities. I want to make sure that our downtowns are thriving. Those are the kinds of issues that we're looking at. When I talk to businesses, they say to me, the economy is doing okay. They don't say it's booming. They don't say it's great, but it's doing okay. I mean, if all of us can remember about 10 years ago, it wasn't quite there, right? It's coming back. It's feeling better. But their biggest struggle is workforce. I don't know about you folks, but I don't know how many here are trying to hire or trying to keep, but it's a struggle. We have a 2.8% unemployment rate in the state. That is very, very low. By Vermont standards, by national standards, very low unemployment. So there's not a lot of people looking for work. We have an aging population, so we have people leaving the workforce and not participating in the workforce, and they are moving into retirement, semi-retirement, part-time work. We need to figure out in Vermont how to keep those people working. So how many of you, maybe you don't have to say this, no raising your hand, just think with me, I'll think your positive thoughts. So how many of you sort of can look out on that horizon and see, like, maybe not too far in the future, I could stop working? That retirement thing sounds kind of good. Okay, well maybe, Tracy, some of you can't be thinking about that yet, but but what's different is folks in their 60s now aren't interested in being warehoused in Florida. They're interested in still being relevant and still being participating in their communities and doing work, and we need them in the workforce, okay? So we have to be thinking about that, as well as how do we recruit and retain the millennial population. But here's a little secret about the millennial population. All of the millennials that you want, all of them have already been created. The manufacturing line for millennials has been closed. They're all out there in the world now. So there's a defined amount of them. And how much can Vermont get is hard to, we're working at that end too. But we don't have the luxury of only focusing on that population, is my point. We've got to figure out how to retain the people that we have here. We have to figure out how to recruit more millennials to stay and to move here. But we also have to think about that mature worker and how do we consider flexibility for somebody who might not want to put in 60 hours a week anymore, but might want to work 25. What are we going to do about that? And we need to address those types of things. So when I think about what the state, I'm going to back up. I just about went over that stage. When I think about what the legislature is looking at and addressing, one of the things that I feel really hopeful about is for the last 3 years, the Vermont Chamber has a sister project called the Vermont Futures Project. And they have been focusing on workforce and what we can do about it. This couple of months ago, they came out with 6 recommendations on how to fix the workforce. And the Futures Project has done some research, and they have looked at how many more people do we need to get to full economic power here in Vermont. We need about 10,000 more workers a year just to keep up with the rate of growth that we have now and the rate of retirements that we have now, which is a lot more people. Now we have 625,000 people in the state of Vermont, so 10,000 more a year is not a lot. We're not going, no matter what we recommend or what gets passed in the legislature, there's nothing that's going to happen where there's going to be a busload of 10,000 people. But the point is to get to that rate over time. And after 3 years of talking about that and working at that, I was really pleased to see that the legislature recognized that last year. And they did their part to try to address that. In the news this week, there was a little bit of discussion about the remote worker incentive. Perhaps you've heard about that. It was passed last year. It was a legislative idea passed into law where there's up to $10,000 of incentives to encourage people to move to Vermont if they're remote working. This has gotten a lot of people going, $10,000, I'll take it, right? So that went viral around the nation. And in Vermont, we've got thousands of people now who have raised their hand and said, I'll take that $10,000 and move here. Well, you know, with any government program, there's a lot of criteria and who's eligible and all of that. And that's all working its way out. But what I love about this is that the legislature put their shoulder to the wheel and said, how can we help? Is this the most perfect program? Is this going to bring in 10,000 people? Probably not, but it's going to help. So that's the kind of thinking and the power that good ideas backed by research focused on our demographics can begin to address this problem. So I'm encouraged that the legislature is interested in incentives to help recruit and retain more people to come here. So my first task for you, your first homework today, is to make sure that whoever you talk to who doesn't live here, remember not just to visit, to ask them to come and visit, but ask them to come and live and work here, or even bring their businesses here, because we need more Vermonters, and we'll take them from elsewhere, but we spend a lot of time and energy telling people to come visit us for a weekend, and we rarely tell them that they should come try us for a lifetime, and we need to do that. That's on us. So I encourage all of you to do that. If anybody is interested in these very particular workforce recommendations that we have, I'll be glad to go into those during Q&A. Or I even have a detailed sheet if anybody's really studious and wants to know those things. A couple of ideas around the workforce also. 3 years ago, I went to the governor at that time, Governor Shumlin, and I suggested that we spend about $2 million a year marketing Vermont as a great place to visit, but we've never asked people to come and live here. So I suggested that we create an economic development marketing plan to do that. The first year was $250,000 out of that big $5.5 billion budget to start that. Not a ton of money, but it's okay. And what they did, what the Shumlin administration did with that was they created an economic development marketing program. It was professionally done, it was robust, it has a task list with items, you know, this costs this much, this, you can check things off the list. I was thrilled with that. And the subsequent 2 years, the Scott administration and the legislature have agreed to continue funding that. And so those things are being checked off the list. From that has come Think Vermont, which is a website, an ambassador effort. It is an effort to do this type of marketing, to get people to understand that there are jobs available in Vermont, there are places for you to live, and you need to come there. That's not to say we don't have obstacles that we need to work on, But this is a way to do that. So I'm thrilled for that. So that will be one of our priorities coming into the session, is making sure that the legislature continues to fund that type of programming, both with the tourism marketing and the economic development marketing. And trust me, when you're talking about marketing in a budget, and the person who's testifying before you might be a low-income advocate looking for a program for our poor in Vermont, it's a tough sell. Marketing is not an easy sell, but I give them kudos and credit for doing the right thing and helping us in a way that is meaningful to help look at our economic growth. So those are two things that are on our priority list as we're looking at that. A couple other things to think about. I noticed that whenever I come to Brattleboro and think about legislation, I have Laura Sibilia, Representative Sibilia, in my head on telecom, and I noticed she's not here, so that's either good for me or not. But telecom's a huge issue in southern Vermont, right? So we were driving down here yesterday and couldn't keep the call going just down I-91. Am I the only one with this experience? No. So, you know, this is a huge issue for economic growth, and we have to address that. My understanding is to get that fixed, if we try to think about broadband to every last mile. So it started in the Governor Douglas years and continued in the Governor Shumlin years. These governors promised that I would get, you know, cell coverage across the state and broadband to every last mile. I have noticed that Governor Scott has not gone out and made that promise, because in case anybody doesn't know this, it sounds like you all do, it hasn't happened yet. So it's not a partisan issue, and it's something everybody wants. What's the obstacle? Money. It always comes down to money. So the want, the desire, the goal is agreed upon, but it's going to take $300 million to fulfill that promise. Wow, right? Where's that coming from? So there have been proposals to raise certain taxes to do that. Those taxes that were proposed to raise were like going to get $1 million to $2 million. Okay, at that rate, it's still going to take a long, long time, right? So how do we incent the private providers to get that down the rural road that I live on that's without electricity today? So how do we do that? So these are the complex problems. What's good about it is there's a common goal. There's very little debate over the goal. It's always the debate about the money. Where does it come from? How much? How often? And how do we deploy it? But it is something that is necessary, because if you're going to start telling people to come and move and work here or bring your business here, they've got to have this. In this day and age, every company is a tech company. You might not think of Brattleboro as a tech center. You are, because every company is using tech in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's just your administration computer, or whether that is, you know, how you connect with your customers, or whether you're using robots on the manufacturing floor. Everybody is a tech company. And that's not going away anytime soon. Another big issue that will be coming up this year that we are watching very closely is Act 250 review, I guess, rather than in the past we've sort of heard that as reform. There has been an effort underway by the legislature to, Act 250 is about 50 years, is that right? Okay, I was going to say 150, I don't know. The Act 250 is 50 years old, and what the legislature decided to do about a year ago is take a deep dive and say, does our permitting structure, how we allow growth in this state, does it still fit with what we need? Has anybody in the room participated? There have been forums all over the state. Anybody? Okay, we've got a couple. Good. Excellent. So these forums have been going on around the state to try to gauge people's interest. It's not a public comment period. And I've had several members go to these, and the report back to me has been that there are breakout sessions, there's groups, and at the end, the final question is, so if you had to choose one, which is more important? our environment, or the economy? I have instructed all the people that I've sent to these things not to answer the question. I don't like the question, because I think in Vermont we have to have both. Do not have the luxury. We do not have the luxury of picking one of those things. So that really sets up a false premise there. Well, here I am, I'm at a forum, I've got to pick one of these. We've got to have both, and we've got to figure out how to be able to do both. And so we are coming to the legislature this year. They will continue that conversation about ways that we think that we can continue to strengthen Act 250, continue to strengthen that so that we have a strong environment, but still allow meaningful growth, still allow us to have our companies grow in areas that make sense, and to do it quickly, because that's what businesses need. If they've got that idea and they want to grow, they've got to do that expansion or bring in a business. It can't take 2 or 3 years. So those are but not changing the overall regulation. So we'll be spending some time on Act 250 as well. I am gonna, in a few minutes, I'm gonna open this up to questions and answers and hopefully delve into any of the other topics that you want. I'd like to spend a little time talking about the tourism community and what's happening in Vermont to that. It's changing a lot, and certainly every town that I know of is reliant on that. We have about 30,000 jobs in Vermont that are in the tourism industry. We have quite a few members who are in the tourism industry, and we have a lobbyist who is dedicated to this. So we see tourism kind of broadly, so traditionally lodging, restaurants, shopping, okay, breweries, distilleries. It's all of that, right? So how many have witnessed the drive from Massachusetts up to a Vermont brewery or a pub to get a certain beer? I mean, it happens where I live constantly. People are in line still to buy our wonderful Vermont beer. This is a good thing. I believe somebody in the Economic Development Department should be handing them out brochures to stay and live and work here, and then they could get beer any day of the week. Whatever it takes, maybe instead of the $10,000 incentive, we should be like, we'll get you a 6-pack, or actually it's a 4-pack of Heady Topper. So whatever it takes. You get one a week for your first year or something. I don't know. Okay, now everybody's like, maybe that'll work. Emily, maybe we should introduce that bill. We'll bring that to the Commerce Committee. That'll be great. But when we're thinking about the tourism industry, it's undergoing a lot of change. We're seeing the Airbnb effort be very strong and very robust, and we are interested in making sure that that is still a vibrant option for tourists, because this is what your tourists demand. If you don't have that option, they won't come, and they won't do the rest of that, skiing, shopping, all of that. So you need to make sure that is part of the plan. We have had an effort for a number of years to work with the legislature around regulation of people who are in the lodging business, who are hosting visitors overnight. So all your inns and hotels already have, we just got 32 new pages of regulations that we all have to adhere to in that world. That continues. But the Airbnb property owners have not been subject to those regulations. And there's several versions of this Airbnb property owner. There is and I will just sort of paint this as how we think about this. There is perhaps a retired couple who has extra space in their big home and might rent a room out a couple times a year for a little extra cash. Not offensive to anybody. Everybody thinks that they should be able to do that. That's fabulous. On the other end of the spectrum, we have people who are gutting homes and turning them into Airbnb properties and have 5 or 6 of them and running those as full-time Airbnb properties. So, and we have everything in that spectrum in between. From the hotel industry, the country inns, the B&B industry, we want to make sure that there is a level playing field, so that there's health and safety regulations, there's fire safety regulations, there's tax pieces. So 2 years ago, we were successful in getting the tax regulation to be on a level playing field. The state has done an agreement with Airbnb. We feel like that is in a good place. In, if you're renting out a home, you gotta pay the rooms tax. That's what it is. So we've seen that get corrected. It's probably not perfect, probably needs a little bit of enforcement, but for the most part, it's in a good place. Last year, we passed an additional regulation in the legislature. We passed an additional Airbnb regulation. We really were asking that these folks be registered and be subject to health and safety inspections, just like any other property that's hosting visitors overnight. We sort of got half that passed last year, so we'll take that. Basically, the law says that when you advertise your Airbnb property, you've got to have your tax ID number on the advertisement on Airbnb. Okay, that's fine. That makes sure you're tax regulation. We don't have a registration and we don't have a fee, and therefore the health department can't do inspections because they have nobody to pay for them. So we'll be coming back and taking a look at that. Again, just trying to create that level playing field for the tourism industry, because when you think about communities and you think about tourist communities, they've got to have all of that infrastructure to be a vibrant place for people to come and visit. So we're trying to work on that a little bit. One of the other areas that we have seen a bit of a fight in is on the rooms and meals tax. Every year, every single year, we have to battle the notion of increasing the rooms and meals tax. It's at 9% right now. And every year there is an idea that we could charge those tourists for something. Okay? The last couple of years it has been for clean water. Now I'd like all of you who don't want clean water to raise your hands. Oh, okay, good. That's a really good place to start, because everybody wants clean water, right? So the question again is, money, how do you pay for it? You see where the problem always comes in, right? So that's where, how do we figure out that piece? I have seen the press reports where the governor has said he's coming in with a plan that's going to add $15 million to pay for some of the clean water programs that we need in this state. I'm encouraged to see that, knowing that he has also said, but no new taxes and revenue and fees. I don't know where that $15 million is coming from, so it'll be interesting. That'll be part of the budget plan, so it'll be interesting to see where that is. But I think there has been several ideas around that. There's been the rooms and meals tax. There's also been a $2 occupancy tax, which some legislators think that those two things are different. If you're running a hotel, they're not. They're the same thing. They're just called different things. One's a fee, one's a tax. They're taxing the same activity. We actually fought back a bill last year that had both those things in the same bill. That one was a little bit easier to knock down because they had two in the same bill. But there's also, in addition to those types of taxes, there is a per parcel fee idea that for every parcel there would be a flat fee that everybody in the state pays that would go toward clean water programs. So that's under consideration again, and maybe there's something new that the governor has thought of that I'm not aware of yet. So those are sort of the really big issues for us. Just sort of looking at the time. Kate, we probably got about another 20 minutes. I'd love to take some questions and answers. This is the participatory part. It doesn't work unless somebody raises their hand and asks a question. But other things that we can cover, there's certainly issues around minimum wage, there's certainly issues around paid leave. I understand that the House leadership is interested in taking a deep dive into economic development programs this year. Kate at the top mentioned health insurance is back, but some of the legislature is interested in relooking at what they just passed last year, so healthcare will come up again. These are all a million other issues that I haven't talked about yet. So now it's your turn. Who would like to get us started? Sure.
So you talked about low unemployment. What have you seen in the trend in the number of small businesses, whether it's formation or otherwise? Because over 10 years, the number of, whether it's the carpenter, the one helper, the plumber, number of people who are unemployed
So the question was about self-employment and sole proprietors who sort of own their own businesses and whether that is growing or not. So Vermont is made up with a lot of sole proprietors, a lot of one-person type businesses working for themselves. There's a ingenuity there. I can't talk to the trends in that right yet, but one of the trends that I have seen that is somewhat troubling is that mid-size, what we call mid-size business, is probably about 20 to about 75. We're not seeing growth in that area. And that's, for Vermont, that's an area where we would like to see growth. Now, some people talk about, let's go whale hunting and find that huge company to come into Vermont with, 1,000 jobs. That's not us. We're just not suited for that. We are suited for helping that small company, that 5 to 10 person employee company, move to that 20, 30, or 40. That's where our growth comes from. So we have seen that group sort of stagnate, but I haven't looked at the sole proprietor numbers recently. So that is a good task for me. Thank you.
Bill?
Betsy, first of all, thank you for being here, and thanks to you and your organization. It's really nice to have such a professional group advocating for business. We need it. Thank you. So unemployment, as Carl brought up, you brought up, is a challenge. I mean, if we're really fully employed, and we might have a shot at getting more people, and we talked about that a little bit, but we don't have a lot of places for people to live that they can afford. Is anything being thought about or done on that level?
Yeah, so the question was about, so if we get 10,000 people to move here, where the heck are they going to live, right? Any realtors in the room? So we do have places for them to live, but they're not always matching with what people want, right? So if you look at our housing overall much of it was built quite a while ago. So we have aging housing, and it's not everybody's dream to fix up an old home. Now, I grew up here. I sort of thought that's what we did. But I have traveled a bit and found that people do have new construction. And they like that. I have a 25-year-old who lives in a very big high-rise in Chevy Chase, Maryland, all new, get all the amenities. I'm like, wow, look at that. Fortunately, he has a job that he can also pay for. Yay, success. Hopefully he'll come back here someday. So, but the housing issue is we have one of aging housing stock. We also have a little bit of an issue around affordability, right? So I might have this number, it might not be exactly right, but about 30% of Vermonters are paying 40% or more of their income for housing. Is that about right? That's about that. So that affordable housing comes in. The good news was 2 years ago, the legislature did team up with the governor. They passed a housing bond, a $35 million housing bond that was to look at not only affordable housing, and this is where the number is kind of funny, right? So there's affordable housing, and then there's housing that's affordable. I keep hoping some marketing genius will come up with 2 different words for these things, because they're intended to be 2 different markets. I mean, affordable housing is to help subsidize low-income housing for people who are at a certain income, certain means. Then there's also those of us who are just working professionally, who are having trouble affording, even though I have, you might have 2 incomes in that, it's not affordable for me. But so we have that problem as well. The Futures Project has come out with a goal of, in addition to bringing 10,000 more people here a year, is getting to the point where we're building or retrofitting 5,000 homes a year. Those 2 sort of things matching each other. Again, not easy, not immediate, but over time be able to do that. And so I think just to give you where we are now, we are building and retrofitting about 1,700 homes a year. So we got a ways to go. Chittenden County has come out and said, well, we need 3,000 of them. The Futures Project is going to look at that 5,000 number and try to distribute that by county around the state, because we think that if Chittenden County does need 3,000, that 5,000 might need to be more. But it's an issue that needs to be addressed. I think the good news is just in the recent past, the legislature and the governor see that as an issue. But that $35 million was brought up and gone and executed that quickly because the market needs that. So yeah, housing is a big issue. Yes, and then go ahead.
So you had mentioned when you talked about Airbnb that it ranged the spectrum from a retired couple rents a room a couple times a year to, people who have multiple houses, they do it as a business. In looking at getting the regulations changed for health and safety and this sort of thing, how far across that spectrum do you go? And also, there must still be traditional B&Bs in the state. How are you dealing with those for the same requirements?
So the traditional B&Bs are currently registered, licensed,
Okay.
and pay those fees currently. So that's not changing. The regulations in the law today say that a lodging establishment is considered anybody with more than 3 rooms. So if you own a B&B, whether you've got it on Airbnb, let's face it, Airbnb is an online platform to reserve rooms. It's not, you don't have an Airbnb property. But and I'm using Airbnb, there's HomeAway and there's a million different things. But so if you have a home and you've got 3 bedrooms in it and you're renting that out using Airbnb, you're not considered a lodging establishment currently by the state of Vermont, and therefore you don't have to register, you don't have to pay a fee, and you don't have to have health and safety. But you do have to pay a rooms tax on that because we passed that part of the law. So we've partly, as a state, we've partly recognized that you're in that business and that you're in that activity and you have to pay taxes on all those rooms, but we don't care about your health and safety if you have 3 rooms or less, which I just think isn't okay. It's only going to take one bad incident for this to change. So that's one threshold. The other threshold in the law says if you engage in this activity for more than 14 nights. So that's another trigger point. So there's some pieces in the laws and the rules already trying to discern these two things. And we don't have a problem with the 14 nights piece. We have a little problem with the 3 rooms. I mean, you're in the business. You know, you're responsible for that person. When I stayed at the Latches Hotel last night, they're responsible for smoke detectors and making sure my health and safety is fine, because I am in their building for that night. Much bigger than somebody's home. I totally get that, but it is the same business. I hope that helps.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the relationship between the Chamber of Commerce and the agricultural community. My thinking is that that's an area where we might see some growth in Vermont, is people coming in and doing some small farming operations. And I'm just wondering if you're reaching out or involved with the health of the agricultural community in an official way.
Not really. So the question was, how is the Chamber of Commerce involved with the agricultural community? You know, farming is a big industry in Vermont, and it's a big business. And we have seen the growth over the last number of years, I would say last decade really, of small farming cropping up, organic farming cropping up. There's a program in the state that started maybe 3 years ago or so called the Working Lands Initiative to help these small farming businesses grow. So maybe I'm raising goats, but I want to get into milking goats. There's a program with that. We're supportive of that, but as far as our involvement goes, we don't have a lot of farms who are members of ours encouraging us to get into that. But we do work with the farming community around land use regulations oftentimes. Because they are businesses, they run into some of the same things that sort of a bricks and mortar type business would run into. So our interests align in many ways. And then when we think about, our restaurants and one of the growing trends there, sort of that farm to table piece, making sure that we have good foods and, Vermont is known. What are we known for? We're known for our clean air, we're known for our outdoor recreation, we're known for, oh my God, we have amazing beer and food and all of that. We're known for our rural environment, and I think we're also known for Bernie Sanders. So these all things fit in the same brand, if you will. So probably not a perfect answer. Was there something specific that you were thinking that we should be working?
An opportunity to get in. I would think these small operations would need some help on the business aspect of their company. There's a lot of very young people, I think, that are thinking about coming or have come to Vermont and have small business operations on these small parcels of land. It's an area of growth for our state and an area where you might be able to help them and get involved with them and have some special interactions with them.
So the question, sort of the line of questioning, if you can't hear it in the back, is around small farming and how we're seeing sort of a growth of young folks coming in, owning land in Vermont, farming that land in a small operational way, and suggesting that maybe the chambers encourage that and get involved in that. So thank you. That's good. Did you have another question, Carl? Yeah.
Yeah, a couple things came up, just on that point Bob was making, BACC and Orly are both involved on the ground. I think at the state level it's hard to be so involved in small business, but they don't differentiate between a small farm business and any other business in seeking those help. So that's where that happened to me. The Airbnb, I just think about flag, don't tread on me. There's disruptors in every industry. We've got housing that's expensive. My son's in Montana. To afford a house, he rented out 2 of his 3 bedrooms so he could afford it. And you can't interfere in that by trying to protect an industry, in my mind. Trying to tax protection on the tourism, hotel industry, and industry. I just don't think you do it. Same complications happen when a ski area develops condominiums or timeshares. They take away from the inn business. You can't regulate that either, or tax it into balance. In communities, there should be apartment house regulation, boarding house regulation, and then you've got the other things, and I think that's where the inspections have to be, and I don't know, we should be involved in trying to interfere with that, whether it's on a chamber level or a legislative level.
So the question is about interfering in the Airbnb growth, and I want to be clear. Right. I want to be clear. We welcome Airbnb. We know that is a growing part of the industry, and we're going to have to see that. And it is a disruptor in the industry, and we want to welcome that activity. Because if we don't, we have 13 million visitors that come to the state of Vermont every year. We need more. We need to make sure those 13 million come. And if they don't have a place that they want to stay, they won't come. They'll find another place to do it. So we have to do that. What we're talking about is making sure that there is, there's regulation around every industry, and just making sure that they're paying their fair share of taxes, and that there's fair regulation over that. And if there's thresholds, 14 nights or under 3, but if you're operating your home as a business, you're going to have the same regulations that the rest of us do. That's how.
But is it a boarding house regulation that's already there, a part of boarding house, or is it, how many regulations?
Sure, there's definitions. Right, there's definitions that separate apartments, boarding houses, and lodging establishments. It's pretty clear if you have people coming in for a night and renting the room for a nightly visit and staying for 3 nights and leaving, that you're not in the apartment house business. That's just different, because the law also says that if that stay is 30 nights or more, now that's a residence, and now that's something different, so, yeah.
So I understand that the chamber is representing their members, and so along the lines of the Airbnb issue, I know that the chamber probably has a big voice representing the B&B and the hotel industry, and so I do wonder how many Airbnb or short-term rentals are members of the chamber and how that would change your dynamic.
Well, what's great about chamber membership is anybody can join. So if they want to knock down my door and start paying what you all pay for dues, I would love it. And I think it would create a robust conversation. We have a lot of inn-owners who are in this very small B&Bs. They're, you know, the chain hotel, the chain hotel experience is a different experience than a country inn or B&B experience, which is different than an Airbnb experience. And the person who's gonna dictate that is the person who's staying. What experience do I want? I wanna stay, you know, at a Hilton because I always know what I'm gonna get. Or I wanna stay at somebody's quirky house. Okay, you're gonna dictate that by your purchase power. So I think, you know, would that change the conversation if folks join? Possibly. We have a lot of our members who are in the B&B industry, who own B&Bs, who are putting their inns and B&Bs on the Airbnb platform. They're moving into the Airbnb market, which is good. So I think that's the point. The question is, you know, health and safety of people's lives. You know, are they paying taxes? Are they subject to any kind of base level health and safety? So that's the conversation, that's the debate. And what Vermont has said so far is a little bit, right? It's not full blown, overblown, a little bit.
Well, I just worry that the chamber, in its current representation, will push for more regulation, and then we'll also have a 32-page document, which seems excessive to me. And
We
should be
think it
pushing
seems
the other way.
excessive as well for the existing businesses.
Right.
We agree with you.
Okay.
If you could see what some of these small inn owners have to do in the name of regulation, and they only have 3 rooms in their house, it's incredible. Yeah. Yes, and then yes.
According to the Vermont Tax Department, there's about 6,000 Airbnb locations in this state. With the other institutions, HomeAway and so forth, you know, there might be 10,000 or more in the state. You need to realize this is also approximately 10,000 small businesses that are operating here. This is part of what is keeping people in their homes, as Carl mentioned. You have old retired people who say, well, you know, we can move to Florida or someplace cheaper, or we can rent out a room in our house. This is retaining these people that you want to keep here, and it also seems to be the lodging and choice for a lot of the millennials. So if that's what we're trying to attract, that's the way to get them to walk in the door and see how wonderful Vermont is.
I agree.
So, of course, it's crucial that we get some tax revenue out of it to balance things, that we keep it safe. Please be careful about the regulation so that you don't restrict an industry that is probably not running on a huge profit margin there, but is enough to keep people in their homes.
Yeah, it helps defray your property taxes for some of that. For some folks, it helps pay that mortgage, whatever that is. Absolutely. Which is why we think that industry should be embraced, should grow. I think that's fine. So, what is interesting about this conversation is that it feels a little bit like people are saying, let's not tax or regulate an industry too much because it might squelch it. I agree. Like for every industry, for every tax, and for every regulation. That balance that you all are talking about is why we exist. We're fighting that for manufacturing companies, we're fighting that for small businesses, for everything. So I think trying to find that balance of where do we allow this and embrace it, and how do we make sure that they adhere to the laws and be able to do that. I think that's what we're looking for, is that balance. Yeah, you had a question.
Yeah, climate change is a business and an economic development issue. I mean, this storm we had this week is another example of, you know, where our weather's going to have more wet snowstorms, like there's more local flooding as well as bigger floods. So I know the Vermont Chamber has been consistent in opposing even looking at a carbon tax. There's a study coming up, I guess, in early January, saying what would be the impacts of a carbon tax. Do you have other ideas? If you're not in favor of a carbon tax, do you have other ideas to address this issue, which is, you know, an issue of today? It's not an issue of tomorrow, it's an issue of today. So any solutions? What are you looking at? Or what do you think about the study that's coming up in January?
I look forward to seeing the study. I think we'll take a look at what those impacts are. I think, as you mentioned specifically the carbon tax, yes, we have been opposed to it, and we're not alone. the issue didn't get any traction whatsoever by anyone in the legislature. So no matter who's in leadership, in policy leadership, Democratic leadership, governor, anybody, that issue's not moving in Vermont. So it's not just our opposition that's holding that back. But I think part of that is that we're a pretty rural state, and folks have to drive a long distance. And yes, there are some ideas around mass transit that are solutions to that, but we really don't have a lot of mass to transit from one place to another. So I think those are vexing problems. And I think what we're starting to see, no, I'm not bringing a host of solutions to the legislature for that. But I think what we're starting to see is industries trying to figure out how to adapt today, like you say, it's here, it's today, and into the future. So certainly when we think about the maple industry, they are looking at adaptations for their particular industry. The ski industry, you know, every ski resort in the state has turned into a 4-season resort, right? You're seeing roller coasters and golf courses and indoor water parks. They're diversifying and preparing for the future as things evolve. You know, we just finished talking about the disruption in the lodging industry. We're going to see that in every industry because that is going to come.
Yeah, I thought sort of an inadequate answer because I think some people are in favor, including some of your breweries, for example, are in favor of looking at this issue. And at least there's people in the legislature, you know, say, we need to look at this study. So, you know, I think that you're passing over that kind of quickly. And I think climate change is coming more quickly than people thought before, so it's not something that can be put off. I don't know what the ideal solution is, but...
I don't either. So hopefully the study will have some answers for us. Yeah.
Early on, you talked about the possibility of raising rooms and meals tax coming to attention of the legislature. Has there been any talk about sales tax?
As she's standing in Brattleboro and can see New Hampshire. I hear you. No, I haven't heard that recently. Sometimes that issue comes up in the legislature around service, extending the sales tax to services, especially as we move more into that getting our things from the internet and service and those types of things. But I really haven't heard that lately. How are we doing? We're doing good on time? I think I will pass the microphone over to Kate and say thank you very much for having me. It was an enjoyable conversation.
Betsy, and you want to add to the swag that you're taking back, we have some really fun stuff from Grafton Village Cheese.
And I'm going to do one thing, you know, we're in the age of selfies, right? So I'm going to do the Brattleboro, right? Everybody raise your hand, say hi. That's great. See you on Facebook a little later.
Thanks so much, Betsy, and thanks
Right.
Charles for coming, and again, a super special thanks to T.D. Bank and Carl for making this breakfast possible this morning. And hopefully we'll see you all walking around downtown Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for Holly Days, Holly Nights, and then mark your calendar for next Thursday, December 6th, 5:30 to 7 at the Brattleboro Music Center for our holiday mixer. So thanks, everybody.
Hey, one more thing. Yes. The holiday season, don't get lost in the Amazon.
That's right.